It's a mesmerising proposition, and it's haunted the history of 20th century art.
The feeling of being in this particular place, themes of escape and longing.
I think that's like comedy's moving in the direction where it doesn't feel the need to be funny anymore,
Yeah.
which I don't know what's going on.
I was fascinated by that notion of nothing. What I've just done is attempt to paint a blind black square. I'm excluding vision, and yet it makes the vision even more intense in my head. It all revolves around this idea of trying to reactivate Malevich's black square into relevance at the beginning of the 21st century.
What do you think?
Love it.
The Black Square by Russian artist Kazmir Malevich is a really big deal in art history, and I wanted to find out why.
The history of Soviet painting, the history of contemporary abstraction, all of these things are bursting out of this tiny canvas.
It's a mesmerising proposition, and it's haunted the history of 20th century art.
When Malevich's original black square painting was revealed in 1915, it caused outrage. It was the most radically abstract art people had seen. It was the first painting that didn't represent anything but itself.
Western artists were moving into very abstract painting, but they were still copying reality, painting a female figure, making a forest. To paint just a black square, to find the ultimate expression of what you believe in. We do not realize how a courageous thing that was. It was scandalous.
Could this work only have come out of Russia at that time?
Yes, when you have no freedom and freedom is given to you, you go to extremes, and then new things can start and happen.
It's been labelled the dawn of modernism, the 0 point of art, and gone on to influence generations of artists, from abstract painters to more broadly, like major Australian performance artist Mike Parr.
I went outside one morning and I suddenly found myself looking at the road, and I thought, bitumen is everywhere now. We're paving over the whole world with bitumen. This is really the end of the black square.
Malevich's Black Square was the inspiration behind Mike Parr's famous work at this year's Dark Mofo Festival, where he buried himself beneath a Hobart Road for 3 days.
I thought all people will have to look at is the bitumen. There was nothing. I said, this represents nothing. Straight away, it started representing stuff. So what I realised doing that performance was, because there was nothing, there was everything for the audience.
But like any great work, the Black Square provokes all sorts of interpretations.
First, a kind of a jigsaw puzzle of different blocks of wood.
References to the Black Square also appear in the work of major contemporary artist William Kentridge, who has a different take on its significance.
Well, for me, the great thing about the Malevich is its impurity. One thinks of it as this moment that comes out of nowhere in contemporary art. And what I've understood was that it came out of the bastard activity of making costume design.
And that's another piece in the Black Square puzzle. This icon of modern art originally began as a stage curtain in the futurist opera Victory Over the Sun, which Malevich did the designs for.
So it's not from a brilliance of purity of thought, that comes afterwards. All the spirituality and all of the mumbo jumbo, I'm convinced, is an afterthought, a justification after the event. And I think it is important, but I'm interested in the side footnotes that come into it.
People should understand the background of it. And then when you look at it, it gets a different meaning, because you get a little bit of history. You understand what freedom is. You understand what it is when freedom is taken away from you.
Malevich's period of artistic purity was, in the end, pretty short-lived. Stalinism took hold, abstraction was prohibited, and by 1933, his painting looked like this. But still, he signed it with a tiny black square.
When he died, he was in his coffin. On the coffin, other fellow artists painted the black square on it. The black square was hanging like an icon above his coffin. It was his statement, his one and only big statement he made.
Well, you can say it's just a black square, but then it has no reason to be. It only has a reason to be if you ask questions. It only has a reason to be if it provokes you. That gesture on his part changed the course of 20th century art and culture. It's an incredible revolutionary moment.
Fighting sequences with the TIE fighters and the X-Wings. He really modeled that after the World War I and World War II dogfights.
Pop on your gas mask, just like we practiced. There we go. Fantastic.
We're not shocked anymore by comedy, I don't think, except in the case of Tonightly. And of course, that's why we got rid of it.
My fucked up father calls me. Tells me he's dying. Here I am.
You're not just bouncing around the country like a tennis ball, eh?
Strange Colours is set in Lightning Ridge, the remote New South Wales town with a tiny population, but the lure of opals buried beneath the dusty ground.
It's all luck, really. Some people have it, some people don't.
Russian-born director Elena Ledkina has been enchanted by the place ever since she caught the bus there one day and turned that fascination first into a documentary and now into a critically acclaimed feature film which recently premiered at the Venice Film Festival. I sat down with Elena for a chat and clearly we didn't do a wardrobe check.
And it really stayed with me, this kind of idea of this place where people go to escape and they gamble, hoping to find these precious opals in the ground, and it seemed so romantic and kind of dreamlike. And I was so struck by the landscape, but also by the kind of people I came across.
Would you like to come in for a cold beer? I'll show you around my camp.
A beer? It's a bit early, isn't it?
Oh, it's never too early for a beer.
There's a moment in the film where one of the locals says, you know, that people are just travelling through, but then they end up staying for, 15, 20 years.
Some people are running from the police, some people are running from relationships, family, whatever. Other people have just had a gutful.
There were people that I came across when I first went who were there, I just got there, I'll strike it rich soon and I'll go somewhere else, but they're still there.
Still searching for those opals.
But also, I think for some people, they've made a home there as well.
Never interested in making a million, it's good to, just piss everything up we get, As soon as you got a pocket or something, you go for a party.
So you started out with a documentary about Lightning Ridge and you moved to fiction with Strange Colours. Did moving to fiction make it possible to do sort of new things with the town, the location, your story?
I guess when you're filming a documentary, or for me at least, I find the kind of ethical debate that you have with yourself very challenging, and I guess fiction frees you up in a certain sense because it becomes more about your vision and how you see things as a filmmaker.
Developed and funded through the highly regarded Venice Biennale College program, Strange Colours was one of the 3 films chosen from 12 and given a micro-budget and a tight schedule, just 9 months from the first draft to the final edit.
It's so hard, but in a way it's such a brilliant lesson in intuition, because you kind of, I think sometimes I'm quite a neurotic person, and I can sit on things for a really long time and go around in circles. And in this process, it was really just, you just have to make a decision. And often you realise that there is only one decision that you will possibly make as a person, and you kind of know what it is.
I'm flesh and blood, a fucking human, and and I've got feelings. Yeah?
I can't help you.
I don't want your help.
A film has to be a question that you're trying to answer, and all the kind of cinematic devices are employed to recreate this quest.
Strange Colours really captures this evocative sort of mood of the landscape. Do you sort of prize that over narrative, capturing a tone or a mood?
Yeah, the starting point for any work for me, and something that always drives the project to the end, is a feeling, a certain feeling that I can't put my finger on, and I can't describe it, and I can't communicate it to anyone else, so I have to make a film. Cinema is so exciting because it can really make you feel, it can take you to a place, a new place, and make you feel something new.
I'll tell you what, the Ridge is a hard place to leave once you get the taste of it.
Hi, I'm Eddie Sharp, and this week on The Filter we're talking 2018 in comedy. And joining me today are three titans of comedic analysis. Greta Lee Jackson is an actor and comedian who is still trying to overcome the trauma of her show Tonightly being axed a few months ago.
What have they got to hide?
Michael Bodie is a TV critic on RN Breakfast with Fran Kelly, and Lauren Carroll Harris writes a column on streaming for The Guardian. Thanks for joining me, guys. The year is winding down and we're going to look at what were the biggest things in comedy in 2018. I think right off the bat you've probably got to say Nanette.
Yeah, after Me Too, everyone was really hungry for that zeitgeist thing to hit comedy in a mainstream way.
I've built a career out of self-deprecating humour, and I simply will not do that anymore, not to myself or anybody who identifies with me. It's not humility. It's humiliation.
And maybe now that the hype has, you know, died off a bit, maybe we can talk about the nuances of Nanette. Because I actually feel her whole thesis, which is that comedy has, you know, the setup and the punchline, which limits the trauma. Like, comedy is bigger than that, right? And we know that from all that really dark, shadowy stuff like Atlanta and the whole direction that US sitcoms are going in.
Well, I think it shows like Atlanta, Transparent is another good example.
Yeah.
I think that's like comedy is moving in the direction where it doesn't feel the need to be funny anymore, which I know.
It's go nowhere.
I don't understand how I like Atlanta. I don't understand how it ended up in the comedy genre. Same with Transparent. I don't know what's going on.
But they're not comedies, they're dramas.
I know, but they're class.
So there's all these comedies.
Dramedies.
Like, yeah.
Crimedies.
Yeah, so, and we used to think that, you know, comedies that weren't funny would pretend they're dramas.
Yeah.
So, and there's weird, as you say, this hybrid of, you know, Barry was another one.
I love Barry.
Please Like Me is another one. Nanette's impact on the zeitgeist was taken way more seriously than its impact on comedy. And now there's been another guy, Drew Michael, in the States, an HBO special, which has sort of moved it along even further. It's a stand-up special without laughter. He's doing it, it's like a Drake video mixed with a Henry Rollins monologue.
I have a hard time with intimacy. I'm afraid to lose the person I get close to. I don't want to date someone I don't love. I love my mom. She's single too, not that it matters. And people are like, what? And you're like, oh. Look at that.
I think it's indicative of where comedy's going overall in terms of people are searching for more of a human connection.
Yeah.
Not just set up, punchline, set up, punchline, set up, punchline. They want to engage with personal stories because, well, maybe it's a reaction to everybody being on their phones all the time and we're not connecting with each other. And I think when people go to see a show, that's the gratification of like, oh, I connect with this person's story, regardless of whether it's a gag fest.
Yeah.
And Ellen knew that 20 years ago, didn't
Yeah,
she? When
exactly.
she was another queer woman who changed mainstream comedy with her personal storytelling.
It has started a trend where stand-up shows have to be, well, first half's going to be all jokes, and then second half, I'm going to talk about, oh, what happened to me?
The harrowing personal story.
I don't know. I was bulimic, and then the second, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
That's the new formula.
There was an element of shock to Nanette that I think audiences aren't prepared for. And other good stuff I've seen this year, I've been binging on a lot of the comedy documentaries. The Robin Williams one was great. The Gary Shandling one.
Yes, the Gary Shandling one.
Excuse me. And Tick Effing Tock about the Doug and Anthony All-Stars.
Oh, yes.
Now, you're watching this, and I sort of grew up with those guys, and you're looking at their old clips and you're going, they could not get away with this.
No.
You sort of censure yourself now as a comedian.
We made out under the dog.
So Nanette sort of was this shock, and everyone said, well, they were shocked because we're not shocked anymore by comedy, I don't think, except in the case of Tonightly, and of course that's why we got rid of it, because we've gone through this Jon Stewart phase where the comedians are all trying to be journalists.
Yes.
I'm going to bring down this government by, I'm going to bring down this president by pointing out how ridiculous they are. Well, politicians are too ridiculous now to be taken down. So we want shows like Tonightly which do a bit of that, but that do totally stupid crap and totally insanely provocative stuff as well. And Tonightly got wiped because it was swearing too much. It was taking politicians on and just having a red hot go. And I just reckon comedians find it harder to have a red hot go.
And
But
also,
you're the comedian.
No, well, it's the added element of you're having a go at ultimately the people who control the purse strings. And as much as you don't want to think that matters, it obviously does.
I assume that must have been part of it because there was there was a period when you guys were announced as cancelled, and then how long did you have to run out the show?
3 weeks, 3 glorious weeks of no one interfering.
Those last 3 weeks were kind of amazing. It was.
We just went crazy. We had Greg Larson on the floor in his underpants and a tarpaulin covered in oil. Mr. Oily.
That was good too, but I'm talking more about like the 10-minute climate change rant.
Oh, very good.
And like just it felt dangerous and kind of vital.
Politics in this country are broken. A system just isn't equipped to deal with a challenge like climate change because it requires political parties to think further ahead than the next election and to maybe develop policies that might go against the interests of their donors. Our politicians have been shithouse at this for decades, and if you're a young person like me, you should feel pissed off.
You knew you were connecting because you were going so viral. Like you were making something like The Weekly just look irrelevant in terms of your instantaneous out there.
It was reactionary. Write it, shoot it, cut it. Yeah, responsive, reactive. Now, that's probably where the danger lies. Because no one can really get in the way. You go in air, like it's like you cut it, you deliver it at 6:45, you start taping at 7. It was the best job I've ever had, and I feel validated by you saying that it felt dangerous because I'd like to think that was justification enough and it wasn't because we were bad.
So what were some of your other favourite shows of this year?
I loved Catastrophe, and I was really shocked that it didn't get a bigger resonance. Their whole idea was that it's this show about, you know, really resentful optimism coming out of a terrible mistake, which is a pregnancy after a one-night stand, and they decide to go with it. And so they're falling in love, but through pregnancy and through parenthood.
You should marry me.
What? Aren't you supposed to fall in love first?
Fewer arranged marriages end in divorce than real ones.
Is that because they end in suicide?
It's kind of like brutally romantic. It's not hard to watch. Like, I don't find that they're difficult characters. It's a difficult relationship, and maybe that's why it's really easy to watch.
Well, it's funny, Sharon went on to do Divorce with Sarah Jessica
Which
Parker,
is just dismal.
I want to get to a place where you can trust me. What would it take for us to get to that place?
Time machine.
It's not helpful.
Sarah Jessica Parker might be HBO's idea of a normal woman, but that's phony. And it's like she just doesn't have that sensibility that Sharon Horgan does. Like, Sharon Horgan's warm and weird and funny and
awful.
Really, and
but like awful in a
she's
in
a terrible
really,
liar.
in a really likeable,
exactly.
real way.
Yeah.
What, you think I slept with someone else, or?
Did you?
I was upset about the fact that you wouldn't apologise or admit that you'd done anything wrong, and, you know, it's a tough time. There's a lot of Brexit.
It reminded me a lot of The Letdown, in that it's like so, it made me never want to have children or get married. It's incredibly grim gallows humour about stuff that's actually real.
It actually gets worse and better every season, because by season 3 they're actually making really life-ruining mistakes.
Great.
And Rob Delaney is like this hectic emotional eater who like wraps hot dogs in ham, and that's where his weirdnesses come out.
People like us. Another dark one that I loved was The End of the Effing World, a little British comedy that was on Netflix really early in the year, and it just had 2 really fantastic teen characters.
Let's leave this shithole town. I'm going whether you come with me or not. You in?
I didn't know where we were going or when I was going to kill her. I punched my dad in the face and stole his car, and that felt like a good place to start.
Just really fresh and funny, and it just was dark but really whimsical at the same time.
A sitcom that is more classic and light, though very like dark and heavy, but in a subtler way, is something I know you're a big fan of it, which is The Good Place.
You, Eleanor Shellstrop, are dead.
Cool.
This is a show that, honestly, in the first season is very middling, and then there's a shock that it's
beyond a twist.
Beyond a twist, and the show reveals itself to be the first comedy that's structured sort of like a mystery box, like Lost or even like Breaking Bad, where it's like every single episode is a cliffhanger, and they twist the format so much that like they go through entire sitcom arcs in 2 episodes. It's kind of incredible.
A comedy shouldn't require that commitment. It's either funny or it's not.
No. And that's the reason a lot of reality TV shows are just successful, because they're just cliffhangers.
Well, exactly. Married at First Sight was one of the funniest things of the year.
It was. What was that one with all the people on the island getting drunk and crying?
Sex Island.
Love Island. That was the Love Island was my comedy hit of the year.
Sex Island's next year.
What was one of your favourites?
I really love This Country.
Scarecrow Festival is like the most important day of the year. That's the beautiful thing about living in a village, is that everyone comes together on days like Scarecrow Festival and just forget their utter hatred of each other.
It's a cult British 2-season wonder. You know, when they do the 6 episodes a season. And it's just, if we're talking about anti-comedy, nothing happens. It's brilliant. It's
great.
like a British
It's
Napoleon
like life.
Dynamite. Yeah, it's like life. It's made by real-life brother and sister. They wrote the show together, and then they play cousins.
Right.
Kurt and Kerry Mucklow, and they just live in this little country town in England, and it's just about their, it's just about their like, they're 2 big kids that never grew up. They're still dressing like they were in high school.
But that is the classic anti-comedy thing of today.
Yeah.
It's people making the same mistakes in their 30s as they did in their 20s.
Yeah.
Because there's nowhere to grow up to.
It's exactly, that's the point it's making. It's very silly, and I like it. But very straight, very deadpan.
Well, thank you so much for chatting to me about the funniest shows of 2018. Hopefully comedy either gets grim or less grim. I can't work out which direction we should have. Less grim would be nice.
I'm with the grim. I want to keep it, light and dark.
That's what we need. We need the Three Stooges to come back.
Who would play the Three Stooges now?
Well, Mel Gibson always wanted to play one of them, didn't he?
Star Wars really does speak to a multi-generational part of the community. Certainly people of my age group who grew up watching the original trilogy, that's part of our DNA. But there's also the prequels and then the sequels as well, which is grabbing a new generation.
Well, this exhibit's really about identity, right? So we're looking at the Star Wars characters and their identity and how their identities came to be. These characters didn't just come out baked. They went through a process of evolving and changing.
I really like to see how Lucas's vision was first put onto paper and storyboards, and then to see the big difference, particularly with Yoda, who was originally called Minch, and he was like a gnome, you know, he was a little man with a white beard and a red pointy hat. And that just, when you look at it and hear the name Minch, it doesn't seem to have that sort of cultural baggage that Yoda does now. In the 1970s, early 1980s, CGI wasn't really a thing, and they had to actually make models. film them on dollies and then superimpose them over onto scenes.
The fighting sequences with the TIE fighters and the X-Wings, he really modeled that after the World War I and World War II dogfights. And he really looked at the footage and said, you know, now study how these planes are moving and chasing each other, and that's what I want my movie to feel like.
I think CGI has become a bit mundane now. I think that people just expect it and it sort of washes over the audience. And I don't think that was the case with special effects in the 70s and 80s. I think it's interesting, particularly for young people, to realise that there was actual models made and we've still got them.
I love, in the ship's case, the giant Star Destroyer. And, you know, it's 8 foot long. It's just beautiful.
One of the other artefacts that I really like is Jabba's eyes. So the big Jabba the Hutt puppet that was made for Return of the Jedi, all that's left of him is the eyes, mechanically operated eyes, because he wasn't built to last. He was only constructed to last for the duration of filming. So nothing's really left apart from his eyes because everything else was latex and wire. I do personally think that it's a shame that movies have moved away from actual effects. I know that some movies, including Star Wars, are going back, at least in part, to do things that way.
Film is art, and the stuff that goes into the making of the film is art. So just like any museum is saving, you know, Leonardo da Vinci's and Picasso's, we're kind of doing that, but we're at the forefront because people aren't quite caught up to the idea that maybe this stuff isn't as valuable as it is. I posted film directors into the archives, and I see their eyes light up when they see things. You know, J.J. Abrams saw matte paintings and went, you know, and I could see him looking at the producer like, can I please have a matte painting to use? And, you know, so they love that too. And there's a practicality for CG and cost effectiveness, but I feel like as directors get a little bit more empowered, they might go, okay, I'm gonna have a couple models anyway. These people have really changed filmmaking and film history. And so to me, I think it's really important that we share that film history for the next 100 and 200 and 300 years.